Many individuals often make casual remarks about how their parents would have slapped me senseless or knocked me into next week when discussing how children behave in a grocery store or at a restaurant. These remarks seem casual and even commonplace for most, as corporal punishment is often viewed as a necessary means of disciplining a child. Those who argue in favor of physical punishment tend to believe that this type of discipline is the most surefire way to gain immediate compliance from a child and correct unwanted behavior. One of the main arguments for the use of corporal punishment is that it appears throughout the Bible. However, corporal punishment is not only an ineffective form of discipline, but it is also likely to harm childhood development and behavior, as well as having negative impacts on adults later in life. Jorge Corrales, who has a Master's of Education in Human Development and Psychology, conducted 69 surveys on 164 children to assess how the use of corporal punishment affects children's early development. On average, children exposed to corporal punishment were about 24% less likely to be developmentally on track than children who were not exposed to corporal punishment. In an article by Debbie Koenig, she analyzes the findings of another of Cordes' studies. In this study, children aged 11 to 13 were shown photos of different facial expressions and their brain activity was recorded. The children were split into 3 groups. One group had never been physically punished, one had been physically punished, and the last had reported being physically or sexually abused. The study found that the children who had been exposed to physical punishment showed similar brain responses to the children who had reported being physically or sexually abused. In an article titled Physical Punishment of Children, Lessons from 20 Years of Research, authors Joan Durant and Ron Ensum discussed several studies suggesting negative impacts of physical punishment on children's development and behavior. One specific study discussed by the authors suggests a correlation between physical punishment and child aggressive behavior. In the study, first-grade boys were either shown a video of a parent physically punishing or reacting nonviolently to their child. The researchers then observed the boys playing with dolls. They found that the boys who had been shown the video of physical punishment were far more likely to show aggression towards the dolls than the children who had been shown the other video. Another study supporting the link between the use of corporal punishment and adverse child behavior comes from Helen Baker Henningham and Taja Francis. The two selected 225 children, aged 5 to 7, with teacher-reported conduct issues, all of whom had been physically punished by their parents. They then surveyed the children's social skills, impulse control, language skills, attention, and academic achievements. Through this study, the researchers found that the frequency of harsh punishment was associated with growth in child conduct problems, a reduction in child social skills, and poorer attention during the test session. In the same article mentioned earlier by Durant and Ensum, they discussed studies which suggest a correlation between corporal punishment and negative effects on a child later in life. They state that several of these studies suggest a direct correlation between adults who were physically punished and depression, anxiety, and drug and alcohol addiction later in life. Another source that backs up the link between corporal punishment and negative effects on mental health is a journal article from psychiatrist Lastrika Gordana. She surveyed 284 11 to 14-year-olds and found that the teens who had reported being physically punished were more likely to express feelings of anxiety and depression. This topic caught my interest as the use of corporal punishment has become a hot debate in the media in recent years. The argument seems to be pretty evenly split, those advocating that corporal punishment is the only way to gain compliance from a child, and those that argue in favor of nonviolent parenting. Though the answer seems to be pretty obvious to me. With mounting evidence that corporal punishment causes developmental delays, adverse behavior, and issues later in life, it seems pretty fair to say that corporal punishment is an ineffective means of punishing a child. One of my key takeaways from this research arose from finding that not only does corporal punishment harm the child themselves, but that recent studies suggest a link between adults being physically punished as a child and them later going on to be violent towards their children and spouse. With mounting and easily accessible evidence against the use of corporal punishment, as well as countless readily available resources for nonviolent parenting styles, there is no reason to continue using physical punishment on children.